obviously we want people to be safe and responsible. And like I said, if you've never hiked a day in your life before and wanting to, summit Mount Washington up Tuckerman Ravine for the first time, probably not the best idea, but there's ways to train for that. And there's ways to prepare for that of course you can do it.
All right. I love Dave's story, and it's not an insignificant life and business transformation. It's definitely not the typical story. Okay, so while trying to figure out how to distill Dave's journey down, I came up with a nickname for Dave. He did not ask for it, and you might actually reject the nickname, but he cannot deny the spirit of it. Okay, I want to introduce Dave Fatula. He's the owner and founder of Guineafowl Adventure Co. And I should have asked you before, is it co or company?
Lives, Guineafowl Adventure Company.
Okay, got it. Okay, and I hereby dub you, are you ready for your nickname? The White Mountains Martyr.
Okay? Oh boy.
The White Mountains Martyr. Okay, so here's the deal. So after 20 years behind a desk in the commercial real estate industry, Dave gave up his career so that others would not have to do the same. He wanted to instead spend his time leading guided hikes throughout New Hampshire's White Mountains, which are some of the most rugged terrain in New England. So don't quit your career to enjoy the outdoors, because Dave did that for you. Okay, he will go as far as picking you up in a van with gear and snacks. He'll guide you so that you don't have to navigate it all. Okay, and you can rediscover the solace and the joy of outdoor spaces. So the aim, Fatula says, is to remove all the stress and barriers involved with hiking so that people just like you can enjoy the experience. The Guineafowl Adventure Company currently offers 16 different guided hikes that range from easy to strenuous and provides guidance, gear, and round-trip transportation. So welcome to the Hike Strong podcast, Dave. What the heck do you have to say for yourself today? You feeling all right?
Thank you. I'm doing great. That was quite the introduction. Yeah, Guineafowl is pretty incredible. It's been a really good journey, and it's been life-changing for me and hopefully really helpful and fulfilling to all the folks who we've taken out.
Yeah, and okay, we'll seg right into that because you say something on your site, or I read it somewhere. And you said, so there's this perspective shift that happens when you're in nature. For me, the acknowledgement that I am tiny and what happens in my day-to-day life is inconsequential in the world and inconsequential in nature. You need that. You need a break from all of the daily stressors of your life. So I'll let you kind of expound on that a little bit. What did you mean?
Yeah, that's cool that you started there, because that's really kind of it for me in a nutshell. That's why I decided to do this. There is a giant perspective shift that anybody will get and appreciate just stepping outside in nature and understanding our surroundings, our environment, the world. Magnificently large place. So easy to get caught up in that micro minutia. Everything is so in your face all the time. And that's not just a metaphor for using digital media. It's also all of our problems, all of our challenges. They all feel so close and so immediate that you really don't get a lot of time to stop and pause and think through things. And if you're up on a mountain, whether you're with people or by yourself, and you're in a small group, and you see the vastness of nature around you, and that these mountains, these trees have been here tens of thousands of years and will be here for another 10,000 years. It just reminds you that some of this stuff really is inconsequential. And I don't mean to belittle, everybody's day-to-day struggles, because we all have them. But I mean, it's nice to be able to step back and be like, yeah, that thing that's like really, really, really bothering me right now, like it doesn't exist here because it doesn't need to. And when you're on a hike, when you're exploring in nature, when you're trail finding, when you're scouting, when you're guiding people, your focus is now. It's the most I don't know, enjoyable form of being present that I can think of. And being present in those moments in nature just gives you this huge perspective shift and almost a release.
Well, there's a lot of research out there about that, Dave. So you live it. You're here to tell about it, and there's science behind it as well. Our DNA goes back tens of thousands of years, and just because we lived civilized for 200 years or 100 plus years, it's still there, man. It's still there. And so let's segue to this, and maybe we can flesh out a little bit more of what you were saying. So kind of speak to the desk worker that you used to be, that that might have a successful business. What are they missing? Why is it important to feel, see, challenge yourself, and immerse yourself in nature?
Well, it's creativity for one. There's this huge burst of creativity that can come up when you are outdoors in nature and not doing that thing you're always doing. I would find myself solving a lot of problems just out on hikes because you have space to think. Or you don't, and you don't think about it at all. And then you come back refreshed and almost decompressed. So, I did spend over 20 years in a real estate finance career. That entire time that I was working in the industry, I still did all kinds of outdoor things. And I've been an outdoor enthusiast my entire life. But to say that obviously I spent plenty of time behind a desk or plenty of time traveling and visiting real estate, doing all kinds of different things that had nothing to do with being out in nature, it consumed a lot of my time. But I always got back into nature, always found my way back to the mountains because I knew that I needed that release. And I mean, it's been meaningful for me since I was a kid. And I didn't want to let it go. And I was really fortunate now to just be able to go back to it and actually make it my full-time job because it doesn't feel like work. But yeah, kind of long-winded answer to your question. I think if you're behind a desk every day, and even in a successful venture, you don't have to be, yearning for the outdoors just because things are bad. You gain creativity, you gain that perspective shift, you gain that mental clarity, that decompression, all those things that, all the research and studies will tell you, you don't, they're amazing. There's hundreds of publications, but you don't need them. You just need to go outside yourself and you'll find out. It's pretty true.
Yeah, you make a good point. I was going to say that exact same thing. We're like two peas in a pod, You could try to solve some problems. You could go online and you can research and you can try to figure out, how to solve a business problem or, have a solution to something. But oftentimes, if you put all that away and you go out for a hike, you might, as you said, the creative, for whatever reason and why it happens, I'm sure there's a good answer for it. But the creativity that happens in nature is pretty cool. So I can relate to that. Yeah, I do it. In fact, I try to get out every weekend, and I have a rule with my wife that I go hiking and then I come home and then I really need like 2 to 3 hours because I know my mind's straight. I could be very productive for that 2 to 3 hours and I can get a lot done. And so I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, that's smart. I like that transition time too. You can't just jump right back in all the time. Sometimes you need a little bit of a transition, a little bit of space, readjust to back where you are. And then bang, you're ready to go.
Yeah. All right. So let's do this. This will be fun. So make a pitch to the Northeasterner, to hike in the White Mountains. They're the White Mountains, the Green Mountains, the Adirondacks. And we may get to some of those in a second, but make your pitch. Why the White Mountains?
Oh, it's the most beautiful backyard in New England. And that's what it is. It's Boston's backyard. It's, if you're anywhere in New England, really, the Green Mountains in Vermont are beautiful. The Catskills, the Adirondacks are also great. They're much further away if you live here in New England. Obviously, if you're in Manhattan, New York City, New Jersey, Catskills, Adirondacks are going to be closer. I guess the pitch really is people don't know these are real mountains. Like the White Mountain National Forest is real mountains. And Mount Washington is the tallest mountain in the Northeast at 6,288 feet. And, somebody who hikes out west is going to say, oh, that's you land in Denver, you're at 6,000 feet. Like, what are you talking about mountains? Like, people don't understand the relative starting ground to sea level. Most times if you're in the Whites and you're starting a hike, you're somewhere between 1,700, 2,200 feet, and then you're climbing, right? So if you start at 1,700 feet and get up to 5,000 feet, That's the same as starting at 6,300 feet and climbing to 10,000, right? Like the gain is the same. The landscape is similar. Your starting points are just different. So that concept of like, oh, the Northeast isn't real mountains, like they're very real. And the views above treeline in the White Mountains are just spectacular. I mean, you have layers and layers and layers of mountains, all the different colors, the mixtures of browns, grays, and greens, the granites, the trees, the sky, the shadows that the clouds, I mean, everything. You just close your eyes and think of the most beautiful nature scene you've ever seen painted, and that's what you're looking at in the Whites. And it's 2.5 hour drive from Boston.
Okay, I like that. We had a previous conversation, and you talked about the trails are different. There are really no switchbacks, and they're kind of like dried out riverbeds and trails where they would ship, they would kind of port out, supplies and lumber, the late 1800s. These trails are straight up and down. Just kind of,
yep.
Talk about that, and why is that obviously challenging but fun?
Yeah, so they're most of the trails that were created, and there have been newer trails and trails that have been changed, of course, through all the years, but a lot of the trails that were created date back to the settlement of the White Mountain area back in the mid to late 1800s. And those trails that were cut were for traversing purposes or were adventurers or explorers, and they were seeking peaks. And so, they weren't national parks. They were curated trails that were, cut to be recreational. So you do find a lot of dried out riverbeds, a lot of rocks, ravines, a lot of scrambles. Your elevation gain, can be anywhere from, a 400 foot per mile up to, you could climb almost 2,000 feet in a mile, depending on the route you're taking. So lots of elevation, lots of scrambling, lots of uneven terrain, lots of single track, not wide, but varied trails too. So you'll find fire roads, you will find wider trails. A couple of trails do have switchbacks on them, but they're more by accident, or they're more just because you were going up a mountain, having direct way up, so you had to cut back. But really rugged terrain, I guess, in a nutshell, and definitely not like the national parks, not like curated recreational trails. So you have to be prepared for that. A lot of people will come up and find it more challenging than they wanted to find it. But I always try to tell people it's not a problem that it's a challenge. It's actually great that it's a challenge, and it should be challenging, right? Like, unless you're climbing mountains every day, this isn't something that should feel just like a normal walk. It will be challenging, and that's okay. And you should challenge yourself because the end result is worth it.
I was going to ask you to make your pitch to, or kind of a battle with the 14er crowd out there. Okay, I was going to have you defend yourself to those folks that would, dog you for your, your 4,000 plus foot peaks. But I think you did a pretty good job. Anything else you want to say about it?
The 14,000s are great. Colorado's amazing. The West Coast is incredible. I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of hiking in Utah, in the Pacific Northwest, in Colorado. I'm taking nothing away from any of those amazing places, but yeah, New England also has its beautiful nature, and the White Mountain National Forest, the Green Mountains, everything you've already brought up, it definitely holds its own.
Okay. So I was going to get into the Green Mountains, the Adirondacks, and the, Mahoosucs. Any final thing about that? Obviously, your favorite's the Whites, and that's where you live. Any last things about just the area overall, including, we didn't get to the Mahoosucs. Any thoughts about that?
The Mahoosucs are crazy. Toughest 30-mile stretch of the entire Appalachian Trail is what's called the Mahoosuc Traverse, and the Mahoosuc Arm. Beautiful. Talk about rugged. There's like 1.5 miles of boulder scrambling. It's more boulder scrambling than hiking. And there's iconic photographs of AT through hikers going through the middles of rocks that, they're peeking their head out with an arrow and a white blaze, and they're kind of like, this is the trail. And it's a spectacular place to be. But yeah, no, it's all rugged. It's all amazing. It's all great hiking. You do have to be prepared. I'm guessing we'll talk about that more, but there's preparation and planning. There's paying attention to the weather. There's having the right gear. knowing where you're going and how long it should take you, understanding those expectations. But any one of these hikes can be done safely and done for, extraordinary benefit.
Let's talk about that and segue into, the most famous mountain there, Mount Washington. And so you can use that as our discussion to talk about being prepared for weather, gear, and so on. And you can relate that to the White Mountains in general. So I'll let you kind of take it from there. You were about to segue into it, so let's just keep going.
Well, yeah, so Mount Washington has probably the most notorious for injuries and for accidental deaths. And you hear about those types of occurrences regularly, especially if you live here. And I'm sure a lot of them have made national news. And, some people are really well prepared and things happen. And that's any death on the mountain is a tragedy. But some people aren't prepared. And it's the not prepared side of things is just really sad because most of those accidents and unfortunately deaths are very avoidable. And the first and easiest thing in the world to do is just check the weather forecast. And not just the weather forecast in your local town, but there's something called the Higher Summits Forecast that the Mount Washington Observatory puts out every single day. And it's more critical than any other piece of gear you have, is knowing that Higher Summits Forecast if you're heading to Mount Washington. And it doesn't matter what time of year it is. Be the middle of summer. There was a storm, I think it was in mid-June, a couple of years ago, that unfortunately someone passed away on the mountain, and there were 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts and sideways freezing rain. Because temperatures above tree line, when the conditions meet, can do anything, any time of year. So really, and not to be dire about this, but just checking the weather, simply checking the Higher Summits Forecast, you're already doing a lot to keep yourself safe. And then also understanding that the mountains aren't going anywhere. So if you do check the Higher Summits Forecast and it tells you that there's going to be 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts and sideways rain and zero visibility, maybe you don't go. maybe you wait. Maybe you change your plans. Maybe you go to a different mountain that's going to also be equally beautiful, but not the highest summit in the entire Northeast. Because, I had a day, actually just a funny story, myself and two people who worked for me who are seasoned hikers and ultra-distance trail runners, and we were going to run Presidential Traverse together for fun. We were calling it a corporate outing, actually, which was pretty great. And, conditions through the Presidentials that day were supposed to be really bad. So we changed our plans. We pivoted. We did a different 17-mile traverse. Literally a 25-minute drive away from where we would have started our traverse for the Prezzies, and had this beautiful day. But we looked back at the Presidential range the entire time, and you just saw this huge, dark, low cloud base over the entire range. And you knew, hey, that's what's up there, and we're over here in this gorgeous weather, because the Presidential range kind of has its own weather pattern. So just knowing things like that and being prepared is going to go a long way. And just having that common sense to also understand, hey, maybe I should listen to those conditions and that they're not really appropriate for me to do this, especially if it's someone who's doing it for the first time. There's plenty of seasoned hikers that can summit Washington in any conditions and be fine, but that's not every human, and it's definitely not somebody who's attempting it their very first time.
Talk about the uniqueness of the alpine tundra and maybe explain what that is.
Yeah, so all the vegetation in the alpine zone above tree line is very unique to its specific environment, and not many other environments, if any other environments, have the same characteristics of algae and fungi and lichen. It's pretty extraordinary. There's a very unique ecosystem up there because of all the wind, because of all the harsh weather. Trees grow shorter, grow stubbier, have thicker roots. The lichen and the moss remains really low, but is really lush from all the moisture that they gain. You get that really cool rye mice in the winter because the moisture in the air is blowing so hard, but the air is so cold that it's freezing on contact with anything it touches. So you'll see these trail signs and tree limbs that just have this sideways ice sticking off of them. It looks like it's been frozen in time. You'll see a lot of photos, a lot of iconic photos on Mount Washington of different things that people have taken photos of that are frozen in real time. I think there was an artist who did a spaghetti noodle in a bowl that was frozen. There were construction vehicles up there because they were replacing some of the water tanks, and in the wintertime they had frozen rime ice across them. So there's this big bulldozer, just like sheets of ice across it. But all of those conditions exist like only in the alpine zone. So it's beautiful, it's fragile, and it's really great to be able to spend so much time up there.
Yeah, and hikers will spend, dozens of miles above the tree line in the alpine zone when they're, when they're enjoying the trails. Yeah, like I guess what I'm saying is with the Appalachian Trail, people are going to spend a lot of time in that alpine zone. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there's lots of above and below tree line hiking throughout the entire New Hampshire. Well, throughout the entire AT, but specifically in New Hampshire AT, you get to cross Franconia Ridge, Garfield Ridge, and also the entirety of the Presidentials and the Wildcats and the Carter-Mariah Traverse. So all that space is above tree line for a significant portion of time, which is I could do the math in my head. It's a significant amount of above tree line miles, yeah. And there's other places too, like, not named portions of the trail, but where you're just passing through peaks and obviously hitting above tree line space. There's lots of magnificent above tree line alpine areas in the whole White Mountain National Forest. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's. I want people to understand how significant that is and how beautiful of a terrain that is. So a lot of people are used to hiking on trails and they've got trees on either side of them. But you talk about, people going above the tree line and then you having them turn around to see the views, and it's just spectacular, and it just blows them away and they can't believe it. And you can't get that in a lot of parts of the country.
Yeah, you
can.
And the story that you just kind of recounted to me, and it's something that I haven't brought up some. It's like perfect that you said that. You had said something before, like, oh, well, what makes the White Mountains so special? What would you say to people? So that story that I told you the last time we talked about, telling people, okay, stop, catch your breath, turn around, and they turn around, they're like, oh, this is amazing. Like that's it. It's a relatively easy hike, and you don't have to hike all that high up. So there's lots of different categories of hikes in the Whites, but the two main like named lists, if you will, right, is the 48 4,000 footers. There's 48 4,000 foot peaks, but then there's another list called the 52 with a view, and those are 52 hikes that aren't 4,000 footers, but that also give you these spectacular views. So you don't have to go, peak bagging and seeking like a Mount Washington summit to get some extraordinary views in the Whites. There's, shorter hikes, easier hikes that will still land you on cliffs or lower summits or mountains that have, prominence of 2,000 feet all around them. So 360-degree views, no matter if you're only 2,900 feet up. So again, those types of views and that kind of awe that you get from seeing this 360-degree view of, the entire world around you, they can come even at shorter, lower hikes. And that's something I think pretty unique to the Whites, is that you still can find those places. You don't have to go and scale Mount Washington to do that.
Okay. You talked about the 48 peaks, the 4,000 footers. So you got, that's analogous to, of course, the 58 14ers in Colorado. Entice the peak baggers in Colorado to come over to hang with you, let's say, and enjoy those. What would you tell them that's different? I think we flushed some of that out, but there might be something else you want to share.
Yeah, proximity is pretty cool. Like there is an entire path. It's called the Direttissima, and it's if you traverse all 48 4,000 footers in a single attempt. So there, I don't know how to compare it to all the 14Kers or like a pro and a con, just simply because I haven't done the 14Kers. But, I think when I think about why I do the 48 4,000 footers is there's a variety that's pretty unparalleled in the sense that, every summit's a little different. You're seeing a different part of the White Mountain National Forest. You might look back and see nothing but nature. You might look back and see, the highway. You might look back and see river streams. You might look back and see a cliff. Each one of them has kind of its own. You might find a small pile of rocks surrounded by trees and go, oh, well, if this wasn't a 48, if this wasn't on the list, I wouldn't have even done this hike. I mean, there's those too, right? There's a little bit of everything. So there is a huge variety of summits, a huge variety of what you find on your way. Some trails have ladders on them. Some trails have iron rings on them. Some trails go straight up. Some trails meander, right? There's fire towers on some of them. They're just so different. Every peak has its own charm. So that's kind of what it is, right? And once you start doing them, it's just sort of like, well, okay, I started, now I got to finish. Like now I want to make sure I see them all. And that's just kind of special to be able to carve out that time and do that.
Yeah. So going back earlier, we talked about the significance, kind of the serious nature of the White Mountain National Forest trails. And obviously fitness can mitigate those issues. So let's kind of segue into that. We had a previous conversation and I talked to you about the Fit for Trips Big Five, and we're going to flush out kind of your side of it. But when I train my clients, I'm talking about number 1, walk inclines, 2, walk stairs, 3, walk lunges, 4, walk far, and 5, HIIT training. Because most people do not have the opportunity to hike throughout the week and the weekend to get in shape for hiking. They just don't. And so that's why I came up with that. So let's kind of use that as a somewhat of a template and inspiration to talk about fitness. You work with a lot of people that come from, Boston in the city and who are busy with, families or at work. So let's flesh it out. So just let's start talking about fitness. I'm gonna let you kind of kick it off.
I like them because they're simple, and it is simple. You definitely need to get yourself moving first and foremost, and then moving by way of climbing, right? Whether it's stairs or whether if you've got a hill in your backyard or whether you live in a neighborhood that's got a loop you can walk around that gives you access to hills, whatever's close to you that you can find. And if you are in the city and stairs are all you have, stairs are good. Stairs are really good. You mentioned incline, definitely going down, losing elevation, declining, super important too, so that when you do go up and you come back down, your body's familiar with that and used to doing it. I love the idea of lunges, like anything where you're training the single leg movement is, vitally important, because when you're hiking, you're not jumping, you're not using both legs at once. You're going one leg at a time, and everybody's body has different imbalances. Everybody has a strong side and a weak side. So training those muscles unilaterally, training your left leg, training your right leg, and all kinds of lunges, right? So forward lunges, reverse lunges, lateral lunges, every direction to really get the hips firing, the quads firing, the hamstrings firing. Absolutely necessary for the type of climbing that you do in the Whites. And then, long distances. So you've got the push and pull, right? Long distances, and then you mentioned the HIIT training. So the long distances are going to help with your aerobic conditioning and your ability to just have that nice steady state heart rate. And then your HIIT training is going to give you that high burst that really elevates your heart rate. And when you work on that high burst heart rate, it allows your body to be more efficient in an aerobic capacity so that you can go further distances without raising that heart rate. That's what the anaerobic training offsets to the low aerobic. So those two things in combination are really vital. You can't just do one. Doing both is going to give you a material improvement over just doing one of the other.
Yeah, and you mentioned stairs, and they're critical for just about any hike where there's elevation changes, but particularly the Whites, because there is such steep inclines, and of course, oftentimes I guess there's an out and back situations. So you're coming down steep terrain. And, stairs, if you envision the handrail on stairs, you'll see how steep that they are. And the reason why you can do stairs is because they have the flats. Okay, without that, you're going to be scrambling. So going up, you're going to get the repetitive nature of transferring your weight from one leg to the other and carrying your entire body weight up a very steep, a kind of aggressive climb. And you get the same benefit coming down, because when you come down, every step you go down, you got to put on the brakes. It's the same thing you want to be able to do when you're going down some steep terrain in the whites. You have to be able to put on the brakes so that you feel sure-footed and confident, and you don't fall, because there are a lot of granite and a lot of rocks. It's somewhat different than some of the trails here where I live in the South, where you've got a lot of dirt, right? A lot of soil. Is that the case?
Oh yeah. Yeah. You do have an incredible amount of varying terrain, lots of rock face, lots of big jagged boulders. The northern portion of the Presidential Range is kind of notorious for you're just kind of like hopping over jagged boulders the entire time. So even when people are hiking up there, they'll often comment, this isn't even hiking. Like, who calls this hiking? Because you're just stepping from one awkward skinny boulder to another awkward slab sticking out of the ground to a flat rock surface up to another rock. So there's a lot of that agility. I think the last time we talked about the same 5 principles, and then we talked about adding instability by using something like a Bosu ball or something like, slam ball, whatever, what are those called? Medicine ball. So that you create that instability. So if your front foot is resting on one of those objects while you're lunging, your ankle stabilizers, knee stabilizers, they have to be working to keep you in balance. And that's vitally important for folks. That whole lunge progression, right? You can add the instability, you can add repetitions, or you can add weight. And when you vary how you add those different things in different phases, you can really build strong hiking legs.
Yeah, and when someone kind of pictures this rock scrambling, they need to obviously have upper body strength, okay? Because more of a kind of a plank push-up type positioning. Also, if you're stepping up onto high boulders, you need to kind of work your hip and knee through a full 90 degrees, even more range of motion. So high step ups are important. And then what a lot of people don't talk about is what's called the eccentric strength. So that's the ability to, if you want to either jump down from a boulder or step off of a high boulder, you need to develop eccentric strength. And so one good way to do that is to, let's say you're doing a lunge, for example, and you're doing a walk and lunge, and you go out and you step with your lead leg. And instead of just dropping your knee down to the ground quickly, you lower your knee down to about 3 to 5 seconds. And then you take your next step and again, lower yourself 3 to 5 seconds. And that develops eccentric strength, and you'll be much more confident stepping up to bottom boulders and stepping off of boulders.
Yeah, completely agree. Any of those sort of pause movements that allow you to hold those positions and then refire again. It's kind of like work under duress. And that work under duress is going to build those eccentric strengths for you that are critical. Kind of one thing that's along the same lines with slightly different too is that people don't really talk about their feet so much. But when hikers ask me, when people are hiking who are trying to get stronger or trying to figure out how to improve their hiking, I always tell them, trust your feet. And what I mean by that, when I tell people that, is that your feet want to do the best thing for your body when you're hiking or when you're trail running. They want to put you on level ground. They want to put you in a position of safety and balance. And when you trust your feet and you're able to move a little more freely, especially on the downs, instead of always straining to pause and put on the brakes, as you said, which creates that strain and tension in the muscles, which fatigues them faster. Trusting your feet, allowing them to do what's best for you, moving a little faster as fast as you can comfortably, and then sort of looking at the path in front of you, kind of like a game of chess versus checkers. Like, hey, I need to think about, 5 steps ahead, not my very next step. And then your body's going to put your very next step where it needs to go to successfully execute that 3rd or 4th step ahead. And that might sound like ridiculous to some people listening, but after a while, it just becomes commonplace in your mind, and your mind just starts doing it. And next thing you know, those downs go really quickly, and you're not using as much of that strength. You can reserve some of it because you're letting gravity do what gravity does, and your feet are putting you in a position where, you feel confident and safe the whole time.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I love moving quickly on the downs, looking ahead and seeing like little rock prominences where I can put my feet. It takes some experience doing that. But when it comes to fitness, it requires a lot of strength around your ankle joint. Okay. So obviously calf raises are important, but also the eccentric kind of calf raises are what people call negatives. So coming up on the ball of your foot and then slowly lowering your heel down below horizontal if you have your foot on a platform. So really strong ankles. Talking about the eccentric work with lunges, and also balance is mentioned on the Bosu, but even trying to find a way just to get just something under the ball of your foot, okay? And trying to balance and maybe perform lunges on a Bosu ball, okay? So it's kind of a bigger service area, but if you can find something, even like a dumbbell, like a heavy dumbbell, if you can get like a 35 or even a 30 and you put it on the ground, it's like a small service area and you can put your foot on it and you can do lunges. You can do reverse lunges and then come up into real high heel position and kind of hold that. And that will give you the confidence to be able to move faster and more agile on the trails that you were just describing. Let's segue out of fitness and just quickly talk about something that's really fun. I call it musical trekking. So when I train for the trips out west and some of the aggressive, challenging stuff that I like to do, I'll do what's called musical trekking. So I'll go out on a familiar trail. Okay, I may not have time to go explore new trails. So it's something I'm familiar with. I don't need a map or navigation or anything like that. I'll put on my AirPods and I'll listen to a band. Let's say, for example, let's just say the Beatles. Okay, because I've already done it. You listen to the Beatles, you listen to the first album, first song, go all the way through that album to the very next album, first song, all the way to the end, and you kind of cruise through their entire musical, all their recordings. So anyway, I love doing that. Just if you had to pick one, I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me a musical trekking or a musical journey, a band you like. Somebody should listen to it. First album, first song, all the way through. Put you on the spot.
Oh, my God. Well, I mean, I could take this in so many different directions because I listen to a ton of different music. My favorite band of all time is Tool, which is a progressive rock band. So if you were going to take a band and listen from the very beginning all the way to the end, there you go. You could get a lot of hiking out of that. They made some long albums. Pretty incredible stuff too. And from their very first EP all the way to what they've just most recently released, styles changed quite a bit too. So you get a huge really aggressive, angry metal, fast forwarding to amazingly deep progressive rock with one of the best drummers who ever played drums, and Danny Carey. So that's a phenomenal band to listen to. I would recommend them before anything. But saying that, what's funny too is that I always have music in my head, like all the time. I don't know if most people have that. Maybe it's something rare, but all the time there's a song in my head. If you were to like see me and be like, "Hey, what was the song that was just in your head?" Something would have been there. And it doesn't matter whether I like the song or not. There's just always some crazy song in my head. Like I was even just thinking this morning, I had this song stuck in my head for 2 mornings and now I can't even remember what it was. But it was some random like song from the 50s. But on my, so there's a hike in the West called the Pemi Loop. It's a 30-mile hike where you do 10 of the 4,000 footers, and you loop almost not really the entirety, but you loop a huge chunk of the Pemi Jawasset Wilderness. Pemi is short for Pemi Jawasset, so it's called the Pemi Loop. And my first time running a Pemi Loop with two friends, every time a song popped in my head, I actually wrote it down, and I'd pull out my phone and jot down a note of what the song was. And I have an entire Pemi Loop playlist now.
Oh, nice.
From all these songs that would come in my head. And it's funny because anytime I do like a long traverse now, I think about that. That's the only time I've actually taken the time to write them down. But a lot of the songs repeat. It's funny, they'll pop back into my head. But yeah, it's funny that you say that because we hadn't talked about that before, but there's always something musically going on in my mind.
Okay, that's cool.
Go check out Tool. Go hike for a really long time and check out Tool.
Yeah, I remember Tool like in the MTV days.
Yeah.
And it was they had the very beginning, some very spooky videos. I'd love to see their evolution. I'll have to see how they've evolved because they were heavy and spooky.
Yeah,
definitely.
Still pretty heavy, much more melody, longer songs, really crazy timing, beautiful stuff.
Okay, cool. All right, let's talk about so that people can do a little research on their own. Now, of course, people can get in touch with you, which we'll talk about at the end, and they can hire you or your staff to take them out on hikes. I'm sure prior to that, people like to do some research, whether they're going to hike themselves or go hiking with you guys. So I thought we could talk about naming the three of the hardest hikes, maybe 3 intermediate ones, 3 beginner ones. Could be 2, 3. Just give the listeners something to kind of go check out and some things that you love to guide that they can join you on.
Yeah.
However you want to take this, go for it.
Sure. Yeah. So anytime we talk about hike difficulty, I always caveat that it's hike difficulty relative to understanding that you are in a mountainous region, right? So the National Park Services does have a hike score that they calculate, which is a combination of hike distance, elevation gained. And when you think about the elevation gained, again, National Park Service, right? So you think of the majority of our country is pretty flat. So if you were to tell someone they're going to gain 1,000 feet in that calculus of a hike, you plug that into their calculation, it might make that hike look moderate or strenuous. Whereas if you're in a region like the White Mountain National Forest, 1,000-foot gain, you just expect that you're going to do that no matter what. So we would calculate, something that's quote unquote easy is under 5 miles, less than 2,500 feet of gain, and a time on feet of a few hours. So that's how we kind of calculate easy. And then moderate is 5 to 10 miles, 2,500 to 5,000 feet of gain, and then longer time on feet. And then finally strenuous is like anything longer than 10 miles. And obviously, just because of where we are, anything longer than 10 miles is going to have, generally speaking, more gain as well. But easy hikes, my favorite easy hike is something called the Welch-Dickey Loop. It's Mount Welch and Mount Dickey. It's a 4.4 mile loop hike. You summit 2 summits, Mount Welch and Mount Dickey. About 1.2 miles into the hike, you wind up on this ledge that has these fantastic views of the entire Sandwich Mountain Range, which is another mountain range in the White Mountain National Forest. So right away, you get these amazing views, and the hike up to that ledge is doable for anybody. So even if you've never hiked before and you wanted to see something and you got to that ledge and then you were like, man, I don't know if I want to do the rest of this, you could turn around, go back down. You'd still get like a 2.5 mile hike out of it. And you'd get some of those really beautiful views. The full hike is spectacular because most of it is in above treeline nature. And from different points on your hike, you can always turn around and be like, oh, look, I was there a couple minutes ago. Oh, look, that's where I'm going next. So it's cool because the way it's set up, you get to that ledge, you summit the first peak, you go down a little bit, summit the next peak, and then you finish out on a ledge that you can see the entirety of your whole trip up into that point before going back down below tree line. So that's a beautiful, beautiful beginner hike. Arethusa Falls is another one, which is in Crawford Notch. Arethusa Falls is the tallest waterfall in New Hampshire. It's 130 feet tall, I think. I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's 130 or 140 feet. beautiful waterfall, easy 3 mile out and back on a really populated trail. So a well-marked, it's well taken care of, kind of like tourist attraction, if you will. But you can add a place called Frankenstein Cliff onto that hike and just makes it a loop hike instead of an out and back. And it makes it about a 5 mile loop hike. So you get great views of Crawford Notch facing south from Frankenstein Cliff, and then you can still get the experience of the falls on your way down. That's another beautiful hike that, is a pretty easy hike. Most people could do it.
Let's keep it at, let's go to kind of, hit us with kind of intermediate.
Yeah, intermediate. I always joke because people are gonna say that's not an intermediate hike. Mount Pierce is beautiful intermediate hike. Mount Pierce is the southernmost presidential of the presidential range, and it's a 6 mile out and back up the Crawford Path, which is again super wide open. Probably they call it the Way Mountain Highway. It's one of the most used trails in the entire forest. But when you get to the summit of Mount Pierce, and actually really right before the summit, on a clear day, you can see all the way to Mount Washington. You can see the entirety of the southern Prezies. You can catch a glimpse of the mountains going towards the northern Prezies. But it's a very doable hike at 6 miles and at about 2,400 feet of gain. That's a good one to do. Let's see, another intermediate.
Let's hit. Well, we talked about Mount Washington.
Yep.
That's the most iconic. So give me another one that's really challenging.
Well, the Franconia Ridge Loop, it is probably even, I don't know if it's more iconic than Mount Washington itself, but if you look up prominent New England hikes, you'll see the Franconia Ridge Loop is probably the most prominent, and it is beautiful. It's an incredible hike. It's a 9 mile loop hike. I want to get this right too. I think it's over 4,000 feet of gain. And you go up the trail called the Falling Waters Trail, which follows a waterfall system for quite a while before spanning away from the river and then taking you all the way up to Little Haystack, which is one of the 4,000 footers. And then from Little Haystack all the way over to Mount Lafayette, which is actually the tallest mountain in the White Mountain National Forest that's not in the presidential range. So once you're out of the presidential range, Lafayette's the tallest. So you get this 2 miles of pure ridgeline above treeline exposure on Franconia Ridge, which is just breathtaking hiking. Just beautiful, unparalleled hiking. And then you finish going back down the loop on the old bridle path, which takes you also past the Greenleaf Hut, which is one of the 8 full-service managed huts that the Appalachian Mountain Club manages in the Whites, which are hike-in, hike-out huts that you can stay overnight in, which is also a cool experience. So yeah, Franconia Ridge Loop, 9 miles, pretty strenuous hike, but if you got it in you, it's an amazing hike.
Okay, cool. All right, so what is the most common positive thing that people say when they come out with you guys for the first time? There must be some thread, that people say. What is that?
I think, however they say it, I think people really appreciate the full service nature of what we do. The concept of, we take care of everything really but the clothes on your back. So we provide the round trip transportation from Greater Boston. We provide the backpack. We provide water. We provide snacks, safety stuff, convenience stuff, sunscreen, bug spray, all the little things. We carry all the first aid kit stuff you'd need, communication, navigation, anything that you would need to prepare and carry and purchase and know how to use and understand on your own. We have it all. And I guess, anecdotally, people love the fact that they don't have to drive home. Let's call value, right? You get done from that Franconia Ridge 9 mile hike, and you don't want to face a 2.5 hour drive back home. You want to recline in our, comfortable Mercedes Sprinter van and maybe close your eyes and just hang out. And, when you open your eyes, you're back in Boston. I think that was kind of the goal. Like I said, we wanted to remove all those obstacles. If someone said, that sounds cool, but I don't want to drive, or that sounds cool, but I don't have the right gear, or I don't want to research backpacks, or I don't even know what trail would work for me. Like, how do I even know where the trailhead is? Where do I park? What does it cost? Like, those are such small things that, you wouldn't think would get someone's way. But, honestly, like, we're all so busy. We're all have so many options of things we're doing with our time. Being able to just remove all those questions and just say, nope, you click online, you reserve the date, you put it in your calendar. And when the day comes, you get to go hiking. We definitely people thank us all the time for just making it easy.
Cool. All right, we're going to start to wrap up, but I want to do some out of the box questions here and see what we flush out. Are there any like emerging trends or developments in the hiking or backpacking industry, that you find interesting or anything like that? It may be not, may not be anything, but I know you have this expo coming up. Anything come to mind, or we're just going to move to the next one?
No, I think it's important to say that, in my view, environmental stewardship and leave no trace has really gained ground in the forefront of our community. And I know it's always been there. I'm not trying to take away from it, always be it, but I have just seen in, probably the last 5 years, so much more of real impetus on making sure that people are paying attention to those things. And people, I think just all around, people are paying more attention to being stewards for their environment. So that is a huge trend that I'm really happy about. And it does seem to be just in the forefront of discussions more often.
Okay. Here's another interesting one. So what's a commonly held belief in your industry that you strongly disagree with? If any, that's outside the box there, man.
That there's a certain type of person that should be doing this. That there's a certain body type, a certain background, a certain ethnicity, a certain experience level. Hiking is for everyone. Nature is for everyone. Obviously we want people to be safe and responsible. And like I said, if you've never hiked a day in your life before and wanting to, summit Mount Washington up Tuckerman Ravine for the first time, probably not the best idea, but there's ways to train for that. And there's ways to prepare for that of course you can do it. And so, there's we all know there's a stereotypical, outdoor athlete, right? And I want to get away from those stereotypes. I want everyone to feel welcome and be able to appreciate nature for what it is and understand that they belong there. And I know that's also a trend, what I think is getting more attention, which is great, but definitely like ignore the stereotypes. If you're interested in getting outside, you just go there because you belong there.
Okay. And I think an interesting mindset. I think there's a couple. I liked exactly what you're saying. Somebody can come and they can hang with you. They can go on a hike. Don't really have to do much preparation fitness wise. Get some exposure and really just enjoy it. Okay. And then there's, of course, the other group of people who are like, okay, I want to go with Dave. I don't want to navigate, but I want to do something really challenging. And I'm going to need to prepare. I'm going to have to do some training. So I think what you do and just hiking in general provides is, like you said, for everybody. There's something in it for everybody. So you just want to go out, walk some flats, do some easy stuff, get out in nature. And then there's the extreme side, which taps into some people's kind of, taps into their DNA somehow, that they need to be physically challenged and step out of their comfort zone and see what they can tolerate. So seems like you can help everybody with that. But I didn't want to stop. The last thing I kind of wanted to say is, any kind of upcoming projects or initiatives that you're involved in. I know you work with youth. I'd love for you to just share just a little bit about that. I think that's important.
Yeah, I'm excited to tell you that our youth programming is some of our fastest growing hiking that we're doing. We work with a few different nonprofits in the greater Boston area to get kids into the outdoors. We work with a couple of different schools enrichment program services, whether it's like my hometown of Arlington. I work with their K-12 enrichment programming to offer hiking clubs. I work with a few different private schools to do in-school outdoor education as well as enrichment. We're actually doing a whole series of day hikes over April vacation with a school here in Winchester, Mass. called the Asera School. getting kids out, and they don't just have to go to their school. They obviously anyone can sign up for that camp. I've got a great summer camp program that we've got almost every week in summer through different venues, which is we call it art and exploration. And I've partnered with a local artist, and we take kids to all different nature environments around kind of northeastern Massachusetts and southern New Hampshire. And each place we go to, we teach them a different art medium. She shows them how to draw or how to watercolor paint or how to create sculptures with the items around them. And we've had an amazing experience last summer running that camp. So we're doing it again this summer, and we've grown that programming. But, it's super important in my view to get kids outdoors and explore. It's happening less and less. You can find all types of research around this too, as it relates to the mental and physical health of kids and what nature can provide them. So we take kids. I think the youngest kid I've taken on a full 7-mile day hike out and back was a 6-year-old. She was incredible. And kids are resilient too. And if they have that I can do it mindset, and when you foster that and bring them into nature, amazing things happen.
So before you tell people how to get in touch with you, kind of wanted to end with, this is not a business podcast, but, you did leave a stable career for 20 years to kind of, just go after your dreams. If there's anybody listening and they've got this dream and this desire burning inside of them, do you have anything that you want to share with them?
Yeah. I think timing is critical. I know that for sure. A lot of times I'm so happy with how things have worked out, and I tell myself, you should have done this 10 years ago. You should have done this 20 years ago. But thinking critically 10, 20 years ago, I wasn't in a position where I could have done this. And maybe the market conditions weren't the same. So I think, you've got to go with your gut. If you're unhappy and you need to change, it's important to recognize that. If market conditions require you to change, it's important to recognize that. But I knew when I started kind of figuring out what Guineafowl was going to be and how I was going to execute on it from a business perspective, I knew that the timing was perfect. It just all felt right. And I feel like I've seen sides of that in our growth, in our ability to expand what we do, and the amount of people that we're reaching, and the positive experiences that we've given to people, and what people have shared with me. Like it's all going in the direction I wanted to. And that had a lot to do with timing, and obviously the incredible support that I had from my wife and my family and my friends and everybody who pushed me to do this. So, there's so many great opportunities available to all of us. And if you're thinking about it, take some time, sketch it out, see what it looks like. And if the timing feels right, jump in.
Cool. All right, Dave, you're a good man. How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so Guineafowl, not everyone's familiar with the Guineafowl, but Guineafowladventure.com is our website. Guineafowl adventure.com. People can reach out to us through our website. You can email us at the info@guineafowladventure.com email address. You can follow us on social media. So we have Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, actually, because we do a lot of corporate outings. If you're interested in corporate outings, you can find us on LinkedIn. But any of the typical social media channels or our website. We'd love to hear from everybody who's got questions, whether you want to go on a hike or not. If you have any hiking in the White Mountains questions, please let us know.
Cool. Folks, I hope you reach out to Dave. He's a good man. I hope you got that impression. Very confident, empathetic guy. So reach out to him for a hike. If you want to do some of the more challenging hikes with Dave in the White Mountains, I'd love to help you with fitness. So you'd go to fitfortrips.com/consultation, and we can have a conversation about that. Dave, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time, sir. And we'll be in touch for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Marcus. Absolutely.
Yeah. Take care. That concludes this episode of the Hike Strong podcast. I'm committed to keeping all of the episodes for free. All I ask is that you subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. And don't forget to share this podcast with your friends. My goal is to build a vast community of hikers with the confidence to crush any local or global trail. I hope you will join me in this endeavor. So until next time, train, hike, repeat, and as always, I'm here to support you every step of the way.